Night falls over the jungles of Southeast Asia. Crickets hum. Rivers glisten under the pale moonlight. And yet the silence hides something sinister. Across the border in Thailand, secret meetings are underway. American intelligence officers, Thai military commanders, and exiled Cambodian dissidents sit together in dimly lit rooms, plotting the undoing of a prince who believed neutrality could save his nation. This is not the open war of gunfire and bombs, it is the shadow war, waged with whispers, bribes, and betrayals. Cambodia, a fragile kingdom led by Prince Norodom Sihanouk, became the stage of a hidden drama. By the end of the 1960s, what began as covert operations would ignite a firestorm, pulling Cambodia into the abyss of civil war. Tonight, we unravel the secrets, the schemes, and the silent deals that shaped Cambodia's tragic descent. This is the untold story of shadows of betrayal, covert war against Sihanouk. The 1960s was a decade where the Cold War spread like wildfire across Asia. Vietnam was already burning, Laos was crumbling, and Cambodia, positioned at the heart of Indochina, was the next piece on the board. Prince Norodom Sihanouk, charismatic yet defiant, refused to let his kingdom become another battlefield. He proclaimed neutrality, playing both sides, accepting aid from the West while tolerating North Vietnamese presence. But neutrality, in the eyes of Washington, was betrayal. For the CIA, Cambodia's refusal to take a firm stand against communism was dangerous. And so, a new plan emerged, not through open confrontation, but through quiet destabilization. Thailand, Cambodia's uneasy neighbor, became the perfect staging ground. From its territory, anti-Sihanouk factions trained, plotted, and prepared under American supervision. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and Cambodia's fragile balance would not hold for long. Part 1. The Silent Web. The 1960s in Cambodia were not defined by the roar of artillery or the thunder of jets, but by the silence between. In that silence, plans were drawn, betrayals plotted, and shadows stretched across a fragile kingdom. Prince Norodom Sihanouk sat at the heart of this web, a man both adored and despised, a ruler who believed he could walk the razor's edge of neutrality in a world that demanded allegiance. His kingdom lay nestled between giants. To the east, the firestorm of Vietnam raged, a war that grew bloodier with each passing month. To the north, China loomed, offering promises of solidarity to anti-colonial leaders, whispering the language of revolution. To the west, Thailand stood as a Cold War battleground in its own right, hosting American air bases and allowing Washington's invisible hand to shape the region. Sihanouk believed he could outwit them all. But as he courted Beijing one week and Washington the next, his balancing act only deepened suspicions. To the United States, Cambodia's prince was unreliable, perhaps even dangerous. To China and North Vietnam, he was useful but untrustworthy. And to his own people, his maneuvers appeared as both brilliance and betrayal. A leader who claimed to guard Cambodia's independence while inviting foreign powers to his table. A prince on the tightrope. Norodom Sihanouk was no ordinary politician. He was a performer, a master of spectacle, who understood the theater of politics as well as the corridors of power. He made films, sang songs, and staged public appearances with the flair of an actor. Yet behind the charm was calculation. His guiding principle was survival, his own and that of Cambodia. When the Vietnam War spread, Sihanouk declared neutrality. Cambodia, he insisted, would not be dragged into another man's conflict. Yet neutrality proved a fragile shield. To secure his country's position, he allowed North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces sanctuary in eastern Cambodia. They built bases, moved supplies along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and used Cambodian soil to infiltrate South Vietnam. Washington watched with growing fury. To American generals, Cambodia's neutrality looked like complicity. Sihanouk's kingdom was becoming a haven for the enemy. But Sihanouk was equally wary of siding openly with the United States. He remembered the fate of leaders who had thrown their lot in with foreign powers, how quickly their nations lost sovereignty, how swiftly they became pawns. For Sihanouk, neutrality was the only way forward. For Washington, it was an obstacle to be removed. The CIA's discontent. By the early 1960s, frustration in Washington boiled over. The CIA drafted reports warning that Sihanouk's refusal to take a firm anti-communist stance threatened the entire Indochina theater. If Cambodia was lost, they argued, the balance of the Vietnam War would tilt further toward Hanoi. In the secret chambers of Langley, voices grew louder. Sihanouk had to be weakened, isolated, perhaps even replaced. But direct confrontation risked open conflict, and Cambodia's neutrality still enjoyed legitimacy on the world stage. The solution lay in shadows, in the careful construction of networks that could gnaw at Cambodia from within. Thailand offered the perfect solution. Thailand, a willing ally. The Thai government, already aligned with the United States, harbored no love for Sihanouk. Old rivalries between Cambodia and Siam ran deep, stretching back centuries. Borders were contested, history stained with wars and occupations. Sihanouk's defiance and flamboyance only added fuel to Thailand's disdain. American operatives approached Bangkok quietly, promising support, money, and the prestige of standing as a bulwark against communism. Thailand agreed. Its border provinces would serve as sanctuaries for anti-Sihanouk factions. Airstrips, safe houses, and training camps emerged in the shadows of jungles and villages. From these hidden enclaves, a covert war began to take shape. Cambodia was no longer just a neutral kingdom, it was a target, a chessboard where pawns would soon be sacrificed. The dissidents in exile. Not all Cambodians adored their prince. Beneath the facade of unity, dissent simmered. Royalist rivals resented Sihanouk's dominance. Leftists saw him as a hypocrite who crushed their movements while flirting with communist China. Conservatives accused him of being soft on communism, while others despised his vanity and his heavy-handed suppression of opposition. The CIA and Thai intelligence saw an opportunity. Exiles and dissidents, scattered across Bangkok and beyond, were recruited. Money flowed, weapons were supplied, and promises of a new Cambodia were whispered in their ears. Some were ambitious politicians seeking revenge. Others were disillusioned soldiers, stripped of power by Sihanouk's centralization of control. They became the foot soldiers of the silent web and underground army, born not on Cambodian soil, but in the shadows of Thailand's jungles. Sabotage and propaganda. The early moves of this covert war were not battles, but whispers. Leaflets were smuggled into Cambodia, denouncing Sihanouk as a traitor to his own people. Propaganda broadcasts beamed across the border, urging Cambodians to rise against their prince. Sabotage followed. Bridges mysteriously collapsed. Supply lines faltered. Agents planted seeds of suspicion in Cambodia's fragile political circles, turning allies into rivals. Every act, however small, was meant to erode Sihanouk's authority and fracture his grip on power. But Sihanouk was not blind. He sensed the shadows gathering. In his speeches, he lashed out against American interference, accusing the CIA of conspiring to destroy him. He expelled US diplomats, tightened control over internal dissent, and drew closer to Beijing for protection. Yet every move he made seemed to confirm Washington's belief. Sihanouk was not a partner but an obstacle. The web tightens. By the mid-1960s, the silent web around Cambodia had grown dense. Thailand's border had become a corridor of conspiracy. Dissidents, once scattered and powerless, now carried weapons and training. The CIA's frustration had transformed into a strategy of erosions, steady, invisible. Cambodia was being prepared, not for immediate overthrow, but for destabilization. The foundations of Sihanouk's regime were being chipped away, one secret operation at a time. And in the shadows, the question lingered. How long could a small kingdom, caught between superpowers and betrayed by its neighbors, hold on before the web finally snapped? Part 2. The Flames Beneath. By the mid-1960s, the shadows had begun to flicker with fire. What started as whispers and scattered sabotage was now growing into something far more dangerous. A hidden war built on training camps, propaganda, and networks of spies. The CIA, working hand in glove with Thailand, escalated its support for Cambodian dissidents. And though the world still saw Cambodia as neutral, in truth, its sovereignty was already bleeding away. One secret operation at a time. Escalation of covert support. The Vietnam War was escalating, and every battle seemed to push the United States deeper into desperation. American generals demanded results not just in Vietnam, but across the entire region. Cambodia, with its porous jungled borders, had become a critical piece of the puzzle. Viet Cong and North Vietnamese fighters slipped into Cambodia to rest, resupply, and strike again. Washington saw this as unacceptable. If Sihanouk would not drive them out, then the United States would act indirectly. Covert support increased. Money funneled through Thailand poured into dissident groups. Weapons, rifles, mortars, explosives were quietly shipped and handed to exiled Cambodians who had pledged to fight against their prince. What had once been a loose conspiracy was turning into a real underground force, prepared not just to sabotage but to destabilize. Secret training camps along the Thai-Cambodian border, hidden in thick jungle and remote provinces, camps sprang up like ghosts. From the outside, they looked like little more than clusters of bamboo huts or abandoned villages. But inside, there were schools of subversion. Thai instructors, often with CIA oversight, trained Cambodian recruits in the arts of guerrilla warfare. They learned to plant mines, ambush convoys, and slip through jungles unseen. Others were trained in intelligence work, how to gather information, pass coded messages, and infiltrate communities without raising suspicion. Some camps specialized in propaganda. Recruits were taught how to write pamphlets, paint slogans, and spread rumors designed to weaken faith in Sihanouk's regime. Radios crackled with broadcasts, their messages carefully crafted in Washington and translated into Khmer. Denunciations of the prince, warnings of his corruption, and promises of a better Cambodia under new leadership. To the villagers who lived nearby, these camps were shadows in the forests spoken of in whispers, avoided at night and never acknowledged in daylight. Networks of spies and informants. No covert war could survive without eyes and ears inside Cambodia. And so, as the camps produced fighters, the CIA and Thai intelligence built another weapon: networks of spies. Merchants who crossed the border were recruited to report on troop movements. Monks were bribed or coerced into passing information from village to village. Even officials within Cambodia were quietly approached, offered wealth or safety in exchange for betrayal. Over time, an invisible map of informants spread across the country. Every whisper in Phnom Penh, every rumor in the countryside, could find its way into the hands of American operatives in Bangkok. The genius of this network was its invisibility. Sihanouk could feel the betrayal around him, but it was everywhere and nowhere at once. The enemies of his regime wore no uniforms, they carried no banners. They were shopkeepers, farmers, and sometimes even members of his own government. Psychological warfare. As the network spread, the psychological war deepened. Propaganda became the most dangerous weapon of all. Pamphlets appeared in villages, claiming Sihanouk had sold Cambodia's independence to foreign masters. Posters, painted in the dead of night, warned that the prince's vanity would lead the nation to ruin. Loudspeakers hidden in border areas broadcast denunciations in Khmer, urging soldiers to abandon their posts and join the true patriots fighting for Cambodia's future. Rumors spread faster than bullets. Sihanouk was said to be secretly ill. Others whispered that his family was stealing the nation's wealth. Still more claimed he was planning to hand Cambodia entirely over to China. Each lie, each half-truth, was designed to erode the fragile trust between the prince and his people. The CIA understood something vital. In a nation as fragile as Cambodia, perception was more powerful than reality. If the people believed their leader was corrupt or doomed, his rule could collapse without a single shot fired. Sihanouk senses betrayal. Prince Sihanouk was no fool. He had long suspected American interference, and by the mid-1960s, his suspicions hardened into certainty. He gave speeches warning of CIA plots, denouncing Thailand as a staging ground for his enemies. He expelled diplomats, tightened his grip on internal opposition, and leaned ever closer to Beijing and Hanoi, seeking their protection. But his efforts were in vain. Every move he made only seemed to confirm the suspicions Washington had already cultivated, that he was more friend to communists than to the West. Worse still, Sihanouk's paranoia alienated many at home. By silencing dissent and lashing out against critics, he drove more Cambodians into the waiting arms of the underground movements. His attempts to defend his throne became the very tools used to undermine it. In Phnom Penh's royal palace, Sihanouk walked the halls knowing he was watched. His intelligence officers reported strange patterns, unexplained leaks, whispers that traveled faster than they could be silenced. He sensed the walls closing in, but he could not strike at shadows. The flames beneath. By the end of the 1960s, Cambodia was like a house with fire smoldering in its walls. From the outside, it still appeared whole, a neutral kingdom, ruled by a prince who claimed to steer it safely through the storm. But within, the flames spread. Dissidents were armed, trained, and emboldened. Propaganda poisoned the air. Spies whispered secrets to foreign handlers, and Thailand, Cambodia's ancient rival, watched with satisfaction as the US funneled resources through its territory, strengthening its role as Washington's indispensable ally. The fire had not yet broken through the walls, but it was only a matter of time. For Sihanouk, the realization was as chilling as it was inevitable. His kingdom was being devoured from within, and the flames would not stop until Cambodia itself was ash. Part 3. Toward Civil Chaos. By the late 1960s, the shadows that once whispered had begun to roar. The covert war against Prince Norodom Sihanouk was no longer confined to secret camps and quiet propaganda. It was now bleeding openly into Cambodian life, manifesting in uprisings, sabotage, and deep political fractures. What had been a game of whispers became a march toward chaos. From whispers to destabilization, sabotage grew bolder. Convoys were ambushed, not only along borders, but deeper within Cambodia. Government officials found themselves targeted, their movements tracked with uncanny precision. Newspapers carried mysterious leaks that painted Sihanouk as incompetent or corrupt. For years, the covert operations had operated like termites, gnawing quietly at the beams of Cambodia's stability. Now, the house began to creak and sway. Dissent that once dared not speak grew louder. Rivals of Sihanouk, once cautious of his wrath, began to believe he was not untouchable. The underground networks fed by CIA money, sheltered by Thailand, and emboldened by propaganda were no longer content to remain in the shadows. They wanted to act, to strike, to bring down the prince who had declared himself the sole guardian of Cambodia. Emboldened factions inside Cambodia. The covert campaign emboldened a wide range of factions. Royalists, who despised Sihanouk's grip on power, saw an opening. Conservatives whispered of restoring true order to the kingdom. Meanwhile, leftists, though often targeted by Sihanouk himself, also sensed that the regime was weakening. Each group, in its own way, fed on the instability that the covert operations had unleashed. For the royalists, foreign support promised a way to topple Sihanouk and reclaim lost influence. For conservatives, the growing chaos justified dreams of military intervention. For leftists, the cracks in Sihanouk's regime were proof that the prince's balancing act had failed. And beneath it all, the Khmer Rouge, still a small and scattered movement, watched and learned. The chaos was not of their making, but it would become their opportunity. The Vietnam connection. Cambodia's fate was inseparable from the war raging next door. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces continued to use Cambodian territory for supply lines and sanctuaries. To Sihanouk, tolerating their presence was a desperate gamble. By allowing them passage, he hoped to avoid their wrath. But this decision gave Washington new justification for escalating its covert war. The CIA's operations in Cambodia were never just about Sihanouk. They were part of the larger chessboard of Vietnam. Every Cambodian faction trained, every leaflet dropped, every ambush stage. These were not isolated acts, but threads woven into the broader fabric of the Indochina conflict. When American bombs began to fall secretly on Cambodian soil in 1969, it was the culmination of years of covert erosion. Cambodia was no longer an observer of the Vietnam War. It was now a battlefield, whether Sihanouk admitted it or not. Thailand's deepening role. Thailand thrived in this arrangement. The kingdom had become the indispensable ally of Washington in the region. American money and weapons flowed across its borders, not just for Vietnam, but for the covert war in Cambodia. Thai generals grew richer, their influence greater, as US reliance deepened. Thai border provinces turned into bustling hubs of clandestine activity. CIA handlers, Thai intelligence officers, and Cambodian exiles mingled in hidden safe houses and jungle clearings. Each shipment of arms, each convoy of recruits, strengthened not just the anti-Sihanouk forces, but also Thailand's role as a power broker. For Bangkok, Cambodia's turmoil was an opportunity. The weaker Sihanouk became, the stronger Thailand's regional position grew. The toll on Cambodians. For ordinary Cambodians, however, the cost was unbearable. Trust eroded like sand beneath the tide. Villagers no longer knew who to believe. Sihanouk's speeches railing against foreign plots, or the whispered rumors of corruption that spread like wildfire. Families were torn apart as some members sided with the regime and others with dissident factions. Fear spread. At night, villagers heard strange broadcasts from across the border, voices denouncing their prince and promising salvation. In the cities, the atmosphere thickened with suspicion. Who was loyal? Who was an informant? Who might vanish next into the shadows of interrogation or assassination? The psychological toll was immense. Even before bombs fell and civil war erupted, Cambodia was already unraveling within. Its people lived in a fog of fear, manipulated by forces they could not see, and betrayed by leaders they could not trust. The haunting descent by 1970, the web of covert operations had accomplished its purpose. Sihanouk, weakened, paranoid, and surrounded by enemies, was finally overthrown while abroad. His fall was not just the product of one coup, but of years of erosion, betrayal, and manipulation. The haunting reality was this: Cambodia had been pulled step by step toward chaos, not by a single invasion or battle, but by whispers in the dark, by secret alliances across borders, by the slow poisoning of trust. The house had not collapsed overnight. It had been hollowed out from within, until one final push sent it crashing into the abyss. What followed the rise of the Khmer Rouge, the horrors of genocide, would sear itself into history. But the path to that nightmare began here, in the 1960s, when Cambodia became the stage of a covert war that devoured it from the inside out. And so, the silent web became flames, and the flames became a storm that would consume an entire nation. Until next time, stay safe and see you in the next Dark History video.